Welcome to Fayetteville Public Library. My name is Joel Bunch. I'm a librarian here in our Adult Services Department. I just want to thank you for coming and thank you if you're watching online. Appreciate that. This will be streaming tonight. We are excited to host Jackson Ford. He's all the way from Vancouver, Canada, and he's going to be talking about the importance of joy in writing, how to address that as an author, and how to seek that out as a reader. And if you're interested, his books are available from Pearls in the back. Haley would be happy to sell you a copy, and then he's going to be doing a book signing after the event. And then also, you may have noticed there are feedback forms in your chairs. We'd love to hear what you thought about tonight's event, or if you have general comments about the library. Appreciate you taking time to fill those out. There's a little green cart in the back. You can put those. We appreciate your consideration. And now, if you'll please join me in welcoming Jackson Ford.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you to this fabulous library for having me, and most of all, thank you to you guys for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. So, this evening, I want to talk about joy, but before I do that, I want to talk about horrifying, violent death. Now, don't worry, spoiler alert, nobody actually dies in this particular story I'm about to tell. Nobody gets so much as a scratch. I realize that might make the story a foregone conclusion, but you were all kind enough to come tonight, and it would be very rude of me to give you nightmares. I will say that this story, and in fact this entire talk, has some strong language in it. No apologies for that. In case you weren't totally aware, I'm the guy who writes books with titles like The Girl Who Could Move Shit With Her Mind and Eye of the Shitstorm, so it's sort of a professional concern. I tried to rein myself in when writing this talk, but it's a bit like breathing for me, so you'll have to forgive me if I turn the air a little bit blue. Now, I'm from South Africa. I live in Vancouver, BC, but I'm originally from Johannesburg. And one of the advantages of living in that part of the world is access to some incredible wildlife areas that we are able to get to without spending huge amounts of money. Now, for this story, put yourself on Lake Kariba, just over the border in the country of Zimbabwe. The largest man-made lake in the world, a massive expanse of water that is home to some of the most incredible wildlife I have ever seen. I was there on a long-awaited trip with my wife's family, 6 of us taking over a 3-story houseboat for a week. Now, the houseboat had what is known as a tender, a tiny dinghy that gets towed behind it that we could take out to go and look at the animals. It's day 3 of the trip, around 5 p.m., beer o'clock. The sun sinking below the horizon, the impala coming down to graze at the edge of the lake. I'm in the tender with my wife, her sister, my mother-in-law, and the pilot, Alec. Alec is a cheerful young Zimbabwean dude with, as you're about to see, absolutely no sense of personal safety whatsoever. Now, the tender boat itself doesn't go very fast. It's very small and a bit shit. But we're having a great time puttering across the lake, drinking our beer, checking out the crocs and the impalas, taking a ton of photos when we round the corner of the river we happen to be in and come across a pack of 14 hippos chilling on the far side. Now, you guys have some dangerous wildlife here in Arkansas that you sometimes need to worry about. I understand that black bears can make their presence known. Is that a thing here? Black bear? Yeah, okay. And you guys have cornered the market on venomous snakes. I did a lot of Googling before I came here. But look, a hippopotamus is something different. I mean no disrespect to your wildlife when I say that I would rather fight 1,000 bears right now, each of them being ridden by hissing southern copperheads, than face a single hippo. And here we were, looking at 14 of them. See, a hippopotamus is what happens when a python and a wild boar take a lot of drugs and have freaky, unprotected sex. It's a giant, mutant water pig that can run faster than Usain Bolt and has a jaw that hinges open to reveal teeth like dirty soda pop cans. Throughout Africa, hippos kill 500 people every year. Believe me when I say, if there is even a single hippo in your path, you need to remove yourself from that situation. By the way, I want to find out what the name of the person who came up for the collective noun for a group of hippos and slap him. A pod of hippos. A pod, like they're dolphins gambling in the surf, coming up so you can pet them on a nose. Try pet a hippo's nose, see how well that goes for you. Now, most of these hippos were submerged in the water, but you could see their heads starting to peek out, the ears starting to prick up as they wondered what this strange little puttering creature was. Fortunately, we still some distance away, about from me to that wall, and the river was wide enough for us to pass by. As I exchanged a relieved smile with my wife and wiped a little bit of pee off my leg, Alec rounded another bend in the river, and there, directly in our path, were 2 more hippos. Hippos aren't very bright. and they're nearly blind. And most deaths occur when they get surprised. So what Alec does is he revs the engine. In theory, quite a smart move. Lets the hippos know that we're there. They exit the river, one on either side, clearing a beautifully open path for us. Which is when Alec cranes his neck to look at the place they've just left and says, "It's too shallow for us, we're going to have to turn around." He executes a quick little three-point turn, which is when we see one of the hippos we scared out of the water going back into it directly in our path. And it just vanishes under the surface of the water, not a ripple. I have never known something so large or so potentially murderous to disappear that completely and that quickly. But we've got no choice. We have to go back. It's either that or we wait for helicopter rescue. So Alec very slowly drives the boat around the corner, the rest of us keeping a wary eye out, when bang! I don't know whether we hit the hippo or the hippo hit us. What I do know is that the boat bucked like a stallion, nearly toppling all of us into the river. Alec gave it full throttle, the boat lurching forward, the rest of us hanging on for dear life and trying not to pass out from sheer terror. And as we exited the scene of the crime, we realized that our trajectory had taken us right into the middle of the big group of hippos from before. Now they aren't just interested. They are actively interested. They are very close and sticking their heads out of the water, and my life is quite literally flashing before my eyes. We are about to become a news headline that other tourists will use to frighten their children. A couple of the hippos opened their mouths as wide as they will go, which took care of any pee I had left. They were so close. They were so close I could count the hairs on their enormous bodies. And at any second, I'm expecting the hippo we collided with to come bubbling out of the water, screaming in whatever language hippos use, "That's them, there they are, those are the bastards that ran me over." And Alec, our guide, reaches over, pulls hard at the leg of my shorts, and points at the hippos. "Take photos, take photos. Get us the fuck out of here." To this day, I don't know how we got out of there. They just let us go. We kept moving forward, and they let us slide out of their midst, and they didn't stop us. The second we were clear, I mean the very second, Alec hit the throttle so hard that I was worried the engine was going to explode. A few minutes later, we're back out on the lake and have downed a couple of beers to steady the nerves. My mother-in-law turns to me and says, dead serious, "Do you think the hippo we hit is okay? Should we go back and check?" I've told this story a few times over the years. Back home in Vancouver, there's a great live storytelling show in a bar downtown every month where the audience votes for the best of 10 stories with actual money on the line. The hippo story has won before, and I think I earned more from that win than several of my books have in royalties. I mention this not to big myself up or tell you what a great storyteller I am. I mention it because, as a friend once put it to me, this is not a normal response to almost being eaten alive. I play up the jokes. I make out like it's some wild adventure, a stage comedy, a Saturday Night Live skit, but it wasn't. Again, 500 people every single year dead. And as many jokes as I make about it, there existed the frighteningly real possibility that myself, my wife, and our family, as well as our guide, could all have been maimed or killed. It would have happened could all have been maimed or killed, excuse me. It would have happened in moments, almost before we could blink. The normal response to that? Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. But here's the thing. I don't consider myself traumatized by this experience. I don't have nightmares about giant teeth and lurching gray shadows. I don't wake up with cold sweats. I haven't been back to a game park since the hippo incident, but that's thanks to the pandemic, not fear. I came through this event more or less unscathed, both physically and mentally. And it isn't because I'm a well-balanced individual uniquely suited to absorb and process traumatic experiences. No, that is as far from the truth as you can get. No, I came through this event, and I firmly believe this, because I found the joy. I'm not just talking about exercising my demons onto the page. In fact, I'm coming at it from a completely opposite direction. If you think about it, the idea of exercising demons onto the page, of dealing with trauma through writing, is a concept that can be a little bit hit and miss, right? There is some robust science behind active journaling, of writing down your difficult thoughts, your troubling thoughts. That I'm not doubting, but it's not the full picture. If writing was a cure-all for trauma, if it was a magic bullet, then every single person who ever thought they had a book inside them would have that motherfucker written and published. And you see, I've often wondered at how writers are characterized in popular culture. We're supposed to be tortured souls, struggling against our demons. We are damaged, fragile artists clinging desperately to our writing as our only method of survival in a world that hates us. Even when we smile, we face the world confidently. When we face the world confidently, it disguises some deep inner turmoil. Yeah, I call bullshit. To be clear, I'm not saying that tortured or suffering writers don't exist. They absolutely do. I'm most certainly not saying that trauma is a myth. I want to be absolutely sure that gets across. Trauma is not a myth. But I think the idea of a tortured artist exists because writing is sometimes hard. I think the difficulty and complexity of the act of writing has created our image of the tortured artist, along with a healthy dose of capitalism, but we'll get to that. The difficulty of writing has twisted this image, amplified it, embedded it in the public consciousness. Writing something that others might want to read can be an incredibly tough task. And because doing it to a high enough standard is sometimes torture, we imagine that we must also be tortured. We internalize these difficulties as part of our personalities. But it's not set in stone, because at its most fundamental, writing is an act of joy. There aren't a lot of things about writing that are universally true, but I strongly believe this to be one of them. When someone writes something for the first time as a child, a story, a poem, a very bad rap song, which I will never perform ever under any circumstances, it's because it's fun, yeah? It's because it makes you happy. You may not understand why it makes you happy or what about the act of arranging words in a pleasing manner sparks you, but it does. You don't view yourself as tortured. You're 5 years old. You don't even know what the word means. All you know is that transferring thoughts from brain to paper gives you joy. The problem, of course, is that there's a large gap between writing a childish poem and writing, say, a National Book Award winner. It's bridging that gap that generates the idea of a tortured, struggling artist. Writing isn't an art. It's a craft, as much as the result of deliberate practice as woodworking, painting, or three-point shooting. At its core, it's full of joy. But there's a lot that reaches beyond that core, and building it up and outwards so it reaches to the heavens can be tough as hell. And so because we struggle to write, to get from where we are to where we want to be, the struggle becomes who we are. It blocks out the joy. It pushes all that joy to the side. I don't want to charge ahead too strongly here. Excuse me, voice is a little rough. I don't want to charge ahead too strongly here. Joy is what lies at the act of writing. But there are many other things that motivate what is created. It'd be hard to call The Handmaid's Tale, for example, a book where joy is the central motivation, because Margaret Atwood was pissed. She wrote that book from a place of entirely justified rage. But whatever that says about the finished product, it doesn't change the fact that when you get down to it, writing, all writing, happens because we like it. Even if you've been staring at a blank page for 3 hours and you're contemplating abandoning your laptop in the woods for the raccoons, trust me, we like writing. What we don't like is what writing has turned us into. And if we're going to return the joy to our writing, then it starts with deliberately seeking out the joy in the rest of your life. That may be incredibly difficult. And if you'll permit me to say so, as a foreigner looking in from the outside, it seems like it gets harder to do that in America every single damn day. But it's absolutely essential. And no, you don't need to throw yourself into a pack of hippos to find it. Fortunately, one of the easiest ways to find joy is something that I'm positive most people in this room do on a regular basis already, which is read. You might argue with me about writing being a joy, especially if you're struggling to finish a book of your own. But one hill I will die on is that reading should be an undisguised source of delight. Nothing makes me more irritated than a list of classic books that one is supposed to read before one dies. I don't give a shit if War and Peace is an essential part of Russian literature. It bored me to freaking tears and I noped out within 50 pages. I'm surprised I lasted that long. Every book you read should give you a little jolt of joy when you pick it up. If it doesn't, you have my full permission to put it down for the time being. Return to it later if necessary, but for now, move on. Life, frankly, is short enough without having to spend time reading books you don't like. I'm not saying you shouldn't tackle difficult books. There are novels out there that are exceedingly important and which take no prisoners. They're challenging, they're demanding, and they deserve attention. But if you find yourself giving over that attention unwillingly, if you find that you have to psych yourself up to keep reading, If you don't feel that momentary little spark of joy whenever you pick it up, time to move on. There are many other books out there. I guarantee even if you put down every single book you start, you will never, ever run out of things to read. You could read a book a day for the rest of your life and never run out of things to read. And nothing will remind you of how to find the joy, both in writing and in your own life, than a book you can get completely lost in. Excuse me. There's a horror writer I rather like called Lauren Bucas. She's South African herself, so I feel like I have a bit of national pride at stake. But even if that wasn't true, I'd enjoy her work. One of Bucas's lesser-known works is called Broken Monsters, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's gruesome and horrific and dark as shit, and I vividly remember sitting on my beanbag in my old apartment in Vancouver, staring goggle-eyed at the page as Bucas wrote about someone's bird tattoos coming alive and tearing their way out of the person's body. Now, maybe it was because I have multiple bird tattoos myself, and I had an unusual interest in making sure this never happened to me. But I also knew that this was joy. The joy only a brilliant book can give you, where nothing else in the entire world exists at that particular moment. There's another side to this, and it shows why it's even more important to find the joy in writing and reading. Joy is power. I want to dig into this for a second because it's super, super, super important. And to explain it, I need to talk about how your joy is different to everyone else's. I'm pretty sure that if a giant chocolate cake filled with $100 bills was to suddenly materialize on the stage right now, really hoped I could manifest that. Anyway, if one were to appear, we'd all experience joy, right? But we'd experience it in different ways. That happy chemicals bouncing around our brains would all appear in different quantities, we'd all react differently, and no matter how hard we tried, we would never be able to replicate each other's joy or fully understand how each of us feel. And that's a beautiful thing. Because joy is so individual, it's directly in opposition to the world we live in, a world that often wants to make us all the same. I'm not going to turn this into a politics lecture. Nobody needs that. But we all currently live in a system that sucks joy out of our lives. Note that I don't use the word designed, as in designed to suck joy out of our lives. Capitalism was designed as a way to let the free market provide the best outcomes for society. Sucking the joy out of things was just an unintended consequence. It's a messy, incomplete system that can easily be used for evil, and lots of people seem awfully interested in doing just that. Joy is a way to fight against this. None of us are going to be able to overturn capitalism, but we don't have to give in to it either. Of course, sometimes it's a little more insidious. There are political groups in this state and others who would very much like to prosecute libraries and librarians and bookstores for stocking certain books, who would like to ban books from schools. And for these people, joy is the enemy. Joy is beyond their control, and so they desperately want to stamp it out. But that's the thing about joy. Seeking it intentionally and clearly, whether writing or reading or simply living, walls off a place that these people can't touch. They'll wail, they'll scream, they'll protest, they'll make demands, but deep down they are terrified of what joy can do. Not just what it can do to them, but what it can do for those who experience it. None of this is easy. Nobody teaches us how to do this. In fact, modern life actively tries to send us in the opposite direction. Now, when I'm doing a talk like this, I often rely on those who've come before me, which is a pretentious way of saying I try and find quotes from people who are a lot smarter than me. While searching for one about joy and power, I came across a truly profound and meaningful one. It goes like this. Joy is not an easy power to master. It infects you, becomes you. Now, there's something about that that truly spoke to me. I looked at it and thought, wow, joy infects you, becomes you. What a wonderful way to put it. What an excellent summing up of the complexity and nuance of joy. Who said that? I wondered. Nabokov? Was it Dickens? Dalai Lama? One of the less recent American presidents? No, none of those. It was a character from the League of Legends video game. Absolutely true. Her name, and I'm sorry if anyone here plays League of Legends, I don't, is Nyla. She's a warrior from a distant land seeking the world's deadliest, most titanic opponents so that she might challenge and destroy them. Having won her power through an encounter with the long-imprisoned demon of joy, Don't look at me like that, I didn't write this. She has no emotions other than unceasing jubilation, a small price to pay for the vast strength she now possesses. Channeling the demon's liquid form into a blade of unparalleled joy, she stands defiant against ancient threats long forgotten. I don't know about you, but I quite like the idea of swinging a blade made out of pure joy. I'll also say that dear old Nyla, if that's how you pronounce their name, is 100% correct. Joy is difficult, complex, and demanding, but it is essential, and boy, is it powerful. If you take away one thing from tonight, other than that I'm incredibly talented and intelligent, you should buy multiple copies of my books and give them to your friends and family. It's that. Joy is power. This seems like a good time to actually mention my books, mostly because if I don't, my publisher will send me a snotty email. Fortunately for you, I don't intend to hit you with a hard sell. Instead, I want to talk to you about the joy that I found writing these books. My real name is not Jackson Ford. It's Rob Buffard, and that's the name I wrote under for a long time. The sales figures of my books were, and I'm being generous here, mediocre. And in 2018, my publishers and I were at a crossroads about what to do next. They said they were open to something new from me, as long as it was completely unlike anything that came before. There's nothing more terrifying as a writer than to be told to submit something completely original. It gave me a lot of sleepless nights, and I went on many, many long, grumbling walks around my neighborhood as I tried, fruitlessly, to come up with something that my publishers and my readers might actually like. Also something they might actually pay me even a little bit of money for. Now, the idea came first. A government agent with superpowers who would rather everybody just left her the fuck alone so she could open her own restaurant. But ideas, the book's really great, you should check it out. But ideas are cheap, yeah? And what got me excited, what truly set me on the path to writing The Frost Files, which is the title of this book series, was a simple, clear thought. I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to write something that made me laugh, that felt ridiculous and fun and consequence-free. I wanted to fuck around and find out in a really good way. The word joy didn't really enter my thoughts then, but that's what this was. A conscious, clear, intentional decision to seek out joy. So I let myself go a bit nuts. I began by having my government agent Tegan deliberately throw herself off the top of a skyscraper in an attempt to escape the cops. She's filled with such unearned confidence that she drags a terrified colleague with her and is completely befuddled when her telekinetic abilities don't immediately stop them from plummeting to their deaths. Later, I had my characters engage in a car chase while the driver was playing Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On at top volume, because why not? My main character, Tegan, is an immature young woman who is obsessed with cooking, so I pulled out every terrible food pun I could find. I had her adventures take place in Los Angeles, which is by far and away the most ridiculous city I have ever visited. I'm still half convinced the whole place is an elaborate hoax created by Hollywood to sell t-shirts. Now, if you're doing your job as a writer, your characters will go in unexpected directions. In this case, Tegan surprised me in quite an interesting way. She's a woman who has gone through horrific trauma in her past and has made it through because at the heart of her character, she embraces joy. She's sarcastic and immature, and she can often be difficult, but I was genuinely stunned to discover how much she loved people and how badly she wanted to make those around her happy, even when they annoyed the shit out of her. I was pleased to find that my publisher, Anna, at Orbit Books, understood how central joy was to the story, far more than I did. I've always been shit at coming up with titles, and I'd called this book Wire and Glass. I can't even remember why, just that it sucked and I didn't have anything better. Fortunately, Anna is a lot more switched on than I am. She gave me a call and asked if I'd be receptive to changing the title to The Girl Who Could Move Shit With Her Mind. When a stately British publishing company enthusiastically suggests releasing a product with the curse word in the title, you don't ask questions, you just say yes. I mentioned getting quotes from people smarter than me to prove my point, and I've saved a couple of really good ones for last. The first comes from Stephen King, specifically from his book On Writing, which is pretty much handed to every new author when they first start writing, like, read this cover to cover. When I'm writing, King says, it's all the playground, and the worst 3 hours I ever spent there was still pretty damn good. Now, I like that one, but I like this one from Kurt Vonnegut even more. It goes like this. I tell you, we are here on Earth to fart around, and don't let anyone tell you different. Thank you very much. I'll be signing books in a minute, but before that, does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
What were you writing before 2018 primarily that you shifted out of?
It was way more sci-fi. I wouldn't characterize it as super hard military sci-fi, but it was still set far in the future on a decaying space station. It was very serious and very straight down the line, and I really enjoyed writing it, but I think it just didn't find the readership that I hoped for because I was just taking myself way too seriously. They're great books, I think, still. It's called the Outer Earth series. You should absolutely check them out because it'd be cool to earn some money from them even now. But compared to the books I'm writing now as Jackson Ford, I'm certainly having a much better time. And from the way these books have sold, it's pretty clear that readers are as well.
So I'm having a little bit of trouble recently with dialogue in the book I'm writing. And I've found that saying the dialogue out loud and having a conversation with myself is a good way to let it see if it feels more natural to me. Do you have any tips for character dialogue, specifically just between two people?
That's an excellent tactic that you're using. I do that myself sometimes. I will literally have a little bit of a conversation with myself. The other thing that I've found most helpful with dialogue is trying to ignore TV series and movies as much as possible, because a lot of them are very overwritten, and trying to just listen to other people around me speak as much as possible, and listening to not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it, listening to where the pauses are, where they stumble over words, what words give them trouble, where they're confident in their speaking, trying to develop just an ear for the conversations around you. Even so much as just going to a coffee shop, having coffee and just sitting and listening. It does take a bit of practice to get together. It took me a long, long time. I'm much happier with my dialogue now than when I first started out, but it's absolutely essential, and it sounds like you're on the right track anyway. It sounds like you've already got that tactic quite dialed. Just keep at it. It does come, and once you get it dialed, your writing will just skyrocket, and you'll be having so much more fun. Yes?
Do you enjoy yourself more when you're having more of a detailed outline, or do you find more by the seat of your pants, or what suits you better?
So I do use outlines, but they're very, very rough. I'll do a vague chapter-by-chapter outline, just literally writing down, in this chapter, this person gets stabbed, here's a witty quote that I think someone should say, oh, look, here's a bad pun, let me shove that in, and at the end of the chapter, this is where they'll be. And once I've written that, the story's kind of in my head, and I find it much easier to go off on various tangents because I've got this wonderful roadmap to come back to. I know there are authors, including Stephen King, who will say, no, you can never use an outline, you have to just start writing immediately and see what comes up, and that's why some of his books have terrible endings. But it's true. I love Stephen King. In fact, he has a new book out today, which I'm really excited to read. But yeah, the dude sometimes just flubs the ending, and you're like, with a little bit of planning, you could have this could have been avoided. But to come back to your question, once I've got that outline in place, and I find I've got the roadmap and I can go off on these little side roads, that's when it starts becoming fun. Because if I allow my characters to surprise me and take me down truly strange paths, I'll look up and 4 or 5 hours have passed and my fingers are throbbing and my back aches and I'm like, this is great. I love doing this for a living. Yes?
How do you determine when those tangents go too far?
That is an excellent question. When I find myself running up against too many problems in quick succession, it's fine when you're going off on a tangent to go, oh, okay, hang on, yeah, I see this takes them a little far from their main objective, it's causing problems, can I get them back on track while still enjoying this tangent? Okay, done that. Oh, wait, no, here's another one. You see these I just feel these little red flags coming up all right, I either need to remove this tangent entirely, or just backtrack a little bit and reassess. The hardest thing in the world for me, though, is to do that because I kind of find that I'm happiest when I'm punching out a consistent number of words every single day. Having to not do that and stop and step away and go on a walk and try work through the problem in my head kills me because all I want to do is be back in writing, but it's an absolutely essential part of the process. If I don't have it in me to step away and work through these problems, the book suffers. And this has happened in the past. So I love tangents. They're absolutely one of the best bits of writing, but yeah, they can go dramatically off track and stall writing for quite a long time. But that's why I've got this roadmap. So if necessary, I can go, well, that didn't work, cut, move to the side, back on track. Yes?
How do you feel you find your voice in writing and evolve that voice as you as a writer continue to evolve?
There's a very simple answer to that, but it's also a frustrating answer. Write lots. Lots and lots and lots and lots. Before I wrote fiction, I was a music and technology journalist. And so I had the opportunity to write lots and lots and lots, because if I didn't get to pay rent that month. So that helped me excise a lot of bad writing, and it helped develop my voice. Alongside that, read a lot. Write a lot, read a lot. Those two things will help you develop your voice, because not only will you start kind of zeroing in on writing that you like and writing you want to emulate, but you'll also find things you don't want to emulate. You'll also be able to look at a book and go, yeah, this is the kind of thing I don't want to do. Write lots, read lots. It takes forever, but it is absolutely worth it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the only way to develop something like voice. Is that kind of, yeah. Yes?
What was going on in your life when you started writing with joy?
That is a really interesting question. Okay, let me think. So this was 2018. I'd just become a permanent resident of Canada, which was cool because that had been a long, tortuous process. And what was going on in my life was a kind of sense of anticlimax. I was finally able to stay in the country that I'd chosen to live in. Cool. My career was going nowhere because my book's under my real name and just nothing. And so I was very frustrated. I'm very lucky to have a very patient wife who I will have been with for 20 years in February next year. So she's put up with a lot of nonsense from me. And so she very patiently said, look, you need to start thinking about this a little bit differently. And I went, fine, I'll go on another walk and try see if I can get the old brain beats working again. But to answer your question, I was extremely frustrated. And so it was almost for me a sort of flip the table moment of, okay, they want new ideas. They want me to write something I haven't written before. I'm just going to write nonsense. I'm going to write the most ridiculous scenario I can and see what happens. And it turns out that flipping the table in that way was absolutely the right thing to do. We had a question over here.
Yeah, earlier you spoke about your word count, and I was just wondering what your daily process looks like when you're at home. Do you break it up into different time blocks, or all at once until you hit that word count? And then how does that change when you're on the road like right now?
So let me preface this answer by saying, please don't emulate me. If you guys are writers, don't try to emulate me necessarily. First of all, I do this job full time. I'm very lucky to be able to do that. I don't have a day job, so I have time to do this. And second of all, I've been doing it for a very long time, so I've built up over time. So I write 3,000 words a day when I'm at home, and I break it up into 500-word chunks. So I'll write 500 words, get up, play with my dogs a bit, have a cup of tea, and then come back. And I'll do that for 3 or 4 hours. If I can get to those 3,000 words, however that works, then I'm happy. It's quite rare for me not to, and I remember days that I don't because it's the worst feeling in the world. It's very much an anxiety thing with me. If I don't hit my word count, I feel quite worthless, which is nonsense. Of course it's nonsense, but it's hard to get rid of those thoughts. On the road, I generally don't write. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, when I'm on the road doing events like this, you guys deserve my attention, not necessarily the books. So I'm writing the Fifth Frost Files book right now, and I've put it aside while I'm on the road because I don't want to split my attention. If I'm writing a book, I want to be focused entirely on that book. If I'm on the road doing events, meeting readers, you guys deserve my attention. But there's also a physical aspect to it. I unfortunately suffer from a little bit of chronic pain. I had a nasty head injury at the end of 2018. So this was after I started writing these books, but not too far after. And that head injury set me back quite a way. It was very tough to get through. And as a result, I have some chronic pain, particularly in my shoulders and upper back. And I find that if I'm not at my desk, which I've set up to my specifications, I can't write as much as I want without pain creeping in. So it works for me. I hope I can sustain doing that for long periods of time. I mean, if I get really lucky and sell multiple series at once, I may not have a choice. I may have to hit deadlines. But fortunately, it's just this series that is ongoing at the moment, although I have sold a couple new ones. So It may come a time in the future where I have to just punch out words as fast as I can. Long-winded answer to your question, I know.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Yes.
When you first started writing the first title, did you know you were going to be writing a series, or were you thinking about it as a one-off? And if so, how did you consistently come up with really good endings? Because all 4 of your books so far in the Deacon Frost series have fantastic endings, and yet allow you to move forward. So
Thank you very much for saying so. That's very kind. So the initial deal was for 2 books. So I knew I'd get to tell the story at least in 2 books, but I didn't know how it would be received or if the publisher would pick up any more beyond that. So I looked at this, and my agent helped me out a little bit with this. Although these books were going to be part of an ongoing series, I wanted to make them so you could jump into either. You could start with book 2 if you wanted. Even now, the series has run 4 books, and you can quite happily pick up book 4, dive right in, and you will still know what's going on. I made that absolutely clear. Like, I wanted to write a series that could be picked up anywhere, which turned out to be a really good idea, because when the pandemic hit and supply chains ran short, including paper, and it was hard to print books, suddenly book 4 was the only book available in the bookstore. And it was really good to be able to say to guys, yeah, just buy book 4, you'll be fine. In terms of the endings, I don't set out going, I am going to write the greatest ending known to man. I see where the story takes me and where a natural finishing point is. I'm clearly very fortunate that it's worked out, and I'm fortunate that someone like you enjoys the endings. But I do know that I want of the books to all end at a natural point where if the reader decided, you know what, I'm good, I don't want to continue with this particular series, they'd still leave satisfied. They'd still go, sure, there might be a few kind of broader loose ends in the world he's created to tie up, but overall, this story ended in a satisfying way. As long as I can get that, I'm happy. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah, okay, cool. If there are no further questions, I just want to say thank you so much for coming, guys. It's always hard to know how these events are going to be received, especially when you're literally in another country. So I really appreciate all of you coming out tonight and giving me your time. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you were here tonight. Thank you so much. Pearls at the back has books for sale. Haley there will help you out. And I will be there sitting on her right, trying not to look spare with a Sharpie. Please come, I will sign whatever you put in front of me. Thank you so much, guys.